I actually feel really good now that I got some, like, coffee. I actually feel like a human being. But anywho, so basically, I was just like, wow, I really recently have just been so creative. Like, I've just been writing so much, and I've been focusing so much on my creativity. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I am no longer depleting myself of my internal resources, whether, you know, it's through like relationships or, you know, certain habits or just anything that would drain me of my creative energy. And I feel like, honestly, for me, that's pretty revolutionary, because I was definitely like very, very creative for like a few years when I was like in that 16-year-old like phase, kind of. But I also was not doing half as much of the spiritual heavy lifting that I am doing now. And that stuff takes like a lot of energy. So I definitely like was not going as deep in myself. I wasn't as on the surface. And the thing with that is, like, over time, like, breaking down all these barriers and like doing all this work really does take a toll on you, and like it does really like require a lot of you. But then simultaneously, I was also like literally being leached off of. And I think when I reached the peak of like my success, at least at that time, was when I also reached the peak of like my like energetic depletion, like my resources being depleted the most, because that was when I really felt like it was illuminated to me where my lack of boundaries was very clear. It was very clear to me at that time. And that was something that I was battling with a lot, because I had this push and pull of like, wow, this thing that I've loved doing, this thing that I put all these years of work into, and now I feel like I can't show up for it in that same way because it's been draining me, and trying to show up again, but it was still draining me. And really just like having to make the choice to be more decisive and more intentional about, hold on, I want to see this happen, about like where I'm putting my time and my energy. I feel like the last step in like reclaiming my like creative energy was like my womb space being protected, because I think that's a huge part of it. My womb needing time to recover and restore. Even now, and I haven't even like, it's only been like a month and some change, and I can just really like, I feel way more connected to my creativity and to my womb. And like not feeling like the need to just like express my creativity through like physicality all the time. And even if I do, it doesn't have to be in that way. Like, it's physical to write, it's physical to sing, it's physical to dance, it's physical to do all those things. So I'm just like, I'm not relying on that or like giving all of my energy to that. And I feel like that combination of boundaries of being like, okay, I'm not going to do something creatively like with my energy until I'm like, unless I'm really, really like inspired and lit up about it. And I'm also not going to be like working with people or giving 100% to people that aren't giving nearly as much as I'm giving, because that's just imbalanced relationship. And I think that's where the healing for me really comes in, and that's where like the justice for me really comes in. I'm really grateful that I had those experiences, because now I have more discernment and more clarity on what exactly I don't want and what exactly I do want. And more specifically than that, though, it was less about what I did or did not want, because what I want kind of changed like ever so slightly. Like, yes, some of the things with like the music career itself changed. Like, I don't necessarily feel as like gung-ho about being like a singer as I did before. However, like, my need to create, or my desire to create and be in community through my creation, has not changed. It has not gone away. But what has changed is me, and what has changed is my approach and my perception, I would say. Like, it really illuminated to me, like I said, my faults, like where I still had room to grow. Maybe that's part of the reason why I was so drawn to that success in that way, in that time of my life, was because I needed to experience some level of illumination in order to heal, in order to transform that and to alchemize that. So yeah, I think the key now is like not letting the things of the past and the ways that the past kind of like went awry, not letting those things or those memories keep me back, like hold me back, because that's even what the whole like rewrite your story is about. It's like, I'm not letting the expectation or the memory of what happened in the past keep me from writing my future or creating my future in a way that feels alive and aligned and excited for me. Like, I'm not going to let the fact that in the past, the story that needed to happen, the challenge in the past, the quest in the past had to do with the lack of boundaries and had to do with a lack of like decisiveness about my worth and all those things. I'm not going to let that keep me from moving forward into the story where, like, yeah, that did happen, but now I've integrated that lesson and I have a more like holistic view of what I want for myself. And I think a big part of it also is like separating from validation was a huge thing for me, because if you're working with insecurities as an artist or as just a person in general, and you're hearing like all of a sudden you're putting yourself out there, and while you're criticizing yourself and nitpicking yourself, everyone's like obsessed with it and everyone's like hyping you up and everything, like you really do start to become attached but also entitled to that validation. And so then when you don't get it, or when you don't put yourself out there in that way, well, I feel like it gets to a point though where it's like, no matter how many people validate you, if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. You know what I mean? And I think I just naturally got to a point, especially like in detaching like from the identity, I also naturally, I had to detach, or I did detach by default to the people who were constantly validating that identity. And there were people who were just validating me, like few and far between. There were people who were just like genuinely appreciative of me and my presence. But for the most of everyone else, I kind of felt like I was just almost like a funnel for like praise, which like, again, that sounds kind of weird, but it just felt like that. It just felt like it was shallow, essentially. It's like being in a relationship with someone who is obsessed with everything that you do, but like doesn't have any sort of like chemistry or intellectual like depth with you beyond that, or emotional intimacy with you beyond that. And that is actually how my relationships were for like the longest time, and my friendships too. So like I think I had to like understand and learn the difference between, you could say like fans and friends, or like friends and family, but I think I would put it as like learning the difference between people who genuinely care about you and people who just see your worth and see your value, or like people who find you valuable for what you do and people who find value in you for who you are. Because those are two very different things, you know what I mean? Because who I am isn't just like the song that I sing one day or the book that I write the next day. Like, who I am is the person in between that. Who I am is also the person that's criticizing that, and the person that's revising that, and the person that's resting, and the person that's learning and tripping and making mistakes and hesitating. So yeah, that's just the lesson of that. And as my birthday approaches, I definitely feel like I'm integrating that. And it's definitely not a one-time lesson. You know, like the thing with that is like, you're going to be, until you really get it and until it really sinks in, it's going to keep coming up. It's going to keep coming up in your face. Like, that's why, like, when you have a relationship that's, like, really shitty, you think you learn the lesson because you broke up with the person, but then the lesson keeps playing over and over and over again. And sometimes we genuinely don't know why, but I also think sometimes we're not really trying to find out why. Like, we're not really taking the initiative to, like, find it out. And usually when that's what's happening, it's usually because it's supposed to happen. Like, we're supposed to learn that lesson, but at the same time, it can get a lot more intense if you're, like, walking through life blindly and you're just like, oh my God, why do I keep getting in these same situations? Like, it's kind of like victim mindset. It's like, why do these things keep happening to me? And if you never shift out of victim mindset, that's when you either get, like, trapped. You get trapped in, like, a storyline, or, like, you get trapped in a paradigm, which I definitely was. It's either you're going to get trapped in that victim narrative and that victimhood for however long, or something is going to happen to you where you have no choice. And those are the moments where usually there are those, like, big, like, tower, or those big, like, trauma moments that we could even definitely internalize, and that even, like, furthers our sense of victimhood. And they're going to be different for everybody, but I definitely just feel like you get pushed to a breaking point. And sometimes, why was he running? Sometimes that breaking point is sickness. Sometimes that breaking point is, like, sudden loss or sudden, like, grief. Sometimes that breaking point is, like, a conflict, you know? So, yeah, that's the part. Some of that you can control. Most of it you can't. But you can control and you can decide how curious you're going to become about why this story is playing out. Like, why do I keep seeing these same patterns? Because I could even see it in my art. Like, I would write about the same thing. Like, you know, like, your art will really illuminate the same patterns that are playing out for you, because I was writing about the same thing for years. I was writing about the same thing, which I was definitely simultaneously manifesting that and calling that in the more that I wrote about it and the more that I confirmed it. But as I was writing about it, it took me a while to really be like, okay, but why does this keep happening though? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh my God, I got betrayed again. But, like, why though? And I think part of that is believing that there's another way. If you genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that that's the only experience or the only reality that you could possibly experience, you're probably not going to even take it a step further to ask that question of why. Because why would you even entertain that question if you don't believe that there's any other experience to be had besides that, you know? But I think when it's time, it's time. And I think for the most people and for the people that I'm in connection with, even, like, the ones that I am in connection with in a spiritual sense, in a non-physical sense, that I'm genuinely, like, mirrored by, and, like, not mirrored by just, like, oh, like, because I see both people who are stuck in patterns, who are avoiding the questions, who are avoiding the curiosity, because that usually leads to, like, self-honesty, and then people who are willing to do that work, you know, like, willing to do that healing work and willing to do that, you know. And yeah, I don't think that I can force anybody to ask themselves why. I can ask them why. I could be like, okay, but why? But a lot of the time they'll just run from themselves, you know, or run from the question, or even, like, if they're asking themselves why, they'll run from the answer because the answer would require change, or the answer would require some level of, like, painful accountability or painful revelation, or, like, some sort of responsibility. I feel like victimhood is one of the biggest things that keeps you stuck. Victimhood and, like, attachment and a lack of faith that there's anything beyond what you've created for yourself. And I can't really teach someone how to believe that there's more for them. Like, I can tell you, but you have to find out for yourself. You know, like, it's like I can show you the world, but I can't force you to get on the carpet. You know what I mean? like Aladdin showed her the world, but he didn't force her to leave the castle. You know what I'm trying to say? So yeah, it's like an invitation that you have to answer. You have to be the one to be like, okay, I want more. I know that there's more. And I feel like for me, that was desire, because at the end of the day, even the people that are addicted to the pain that they're experiencing from that story that they keep living out and affirming, even the people that are addicted to those narratives, they deep down know that they desire more. Like deep down, they know that this is not all that they could have. I think that that's true for like most people. That deep down in their soul, they know. Because you always have an intuition. That's the thing. You always have had the intuition. It's always been there. I just think that it gets covered in like the rubble. It gets buried underneath all the weeds that you haven't uprooted. Like that seed of intuition gets stuck, or it's not watered. You know what I mean? Like it can't grow because there's so much covering it. You know, it's neglected. Like your intuition is neglected, or it's like you turn up the volume on the voices that are doubting and hurting and don't believe, and then your intuition's voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter, or you just distract it with sounds and Netflix and songs and Megan Thee Stallion. You know what I mean? Like, these are all personal experiences that I can definitely say that I've definitely done. Or you distract it with sex or lovers or food or consumption. Usually it's consumption. But the voice never really goes away. So that's where the like work in sort of like creating space comes in. Like creating space to hear, creating space. And I think a lot of that happens in the body. Because a lot of my life changed when I started treating my body differently. Because we treat the body poorly to then reaffirm and cement in the hurtful narratives that we have about ourselves, or the trauma that that's been inflicted upon us. We form a weapon out of that, and then we use it against ourselves in whatever form of self-harm that we choose. And your intuition knows that that's what you're doing. Your soul knows, your heart knows that a lot of it is self-inflicted. And that's not saying that people can't have been victimized. But for the people who it's like a story of their own creation, because like I'm not victimized in the ways that I used to be. Like I used to feel hunted by men. Like literally like a Little Red Riding Hood. Like I felt hunted. Not Little Red Riding Hood, what's her name? Snow White. I felt hunted. And that was my story. I was like, oh, I'm being hunted because I'm just this fair little naive thing, and you know, these men are hunting me, even though it was really a woman, but these men are hunting me, and oh my God, and then a man has to save me, and men have to like take me in and give me a home. Like, you know what I mean? It's just so like damsel in distress bullshit. And the thing is, I never really even like resonated with that story on the inside of me. I always resonated more with like the Mulans or the Braves or the Meridas or the, you know what I mean? The ones who took their life into their own hands and rebelled and went against the grain. And yeah, that was my life. Like that was my story. And it shifted and changed as I shifted and changed, but the core of it was the same. That I was a victim. That was the core of the story. That I was a victim, that life was happening to me, that people were hurting me, people were betraying me. But it was really, I was running from myself. I was betraying myself. I was taking advantage of myself by letting other people take advantage of me. Like, there is no knight in shining armor coming to save me. And I wanted that so badly. I wanted that so badly, but it just never happened. But I saved me. Like, I did that. You know what I mean? I did that. Like, I completely shifted my narrative. I completely shifted my story from waiting for someone to save me to literally saving myself and others. Like, not saving others in the way of, like, being their, like, savior, but by being a mirror that they can do the same. Like, you know, it's like I'm not going to teach you, like, I'm not going to, like, force you to fight, but I'm going to give you the weapon or just let you know that it's there. And if you want to be taught, I can help you. You know what I mean? It's like free will. It's free will choice. Like, I can tell you that you're not a victim, but I can't force you to act like a hero. It's kind of like in The Matrix, you know? Even after, what's his name? I hate when that thing does that. Even after, what's his name, man? Bro, not Neo, the other dude. I know, I can hear people already saying it. What is his name? Morpheus. Okay, after Morpheus, even after Morpheus, like, trains him, he still has to believe he's the one. You know what I mean? Like, he still has to believe. And this is the thing. It wasn't even Neo in that one scene where, like, Morpheus was all stuck and when getting his mind all messed up. It wasn't even Neo that really saved him. Morpheus had to break the chains for his own self. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a cycle. There's always a free will element. But yeah. Anywho. That's all feeling really resonant. And I'm feeling clearer and clearer and clearer about the story that I'm telling. And how it's shifted so much. It's really shifted so much. And that is like such a beautiful testimony and such a beautiful testament to my growth. To my growth. And it honors my past to tell my story in the way that helps others as well. Like, it's beautiful. It's actually very healing. It's very healing to tell my story. Because it's not really mine. It's ours. It's yours. If you choose it.